When I first heard that there was a patch of garbage in the Pacific Ocean the size of Texas, I was amazed and horrified. Growing up in Hawaii, we learned extensively about the importance of the Pacific Ocean and how to take care of it. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch has affected many populations of marine animals and littered beaches of coastal regions, demonstrating the unseen negative effects of our plastic consumption. After learning about this, I became invested in learning about various waste streams and how to address them. After doing some research, I noticed that certain types of waste were addressed more in public discourse than others, with plastic being one of the frontrunners. Perhaps the movement surrounding plastics is due to the compelling narrative surrounding it in order to raise awareness. One tactic used in this moment was the process of making plastics somehow charismatic, something that exercises a compelling charm that inspires devotion in others. Many environmental movements utilize charismatic megafauna or flagship species in their campaigns because they serve as symbols and rallying points to stimulate conservation, awareness, and action. This tactic could be observed in commercials of baby turtles choking on a plastic bag alongside an image of plastic bags that resemble jellyfish in the ocean. Charismatic megafauna serves as an emotional platform to visualize the unseen. These images are used frequently in campaigns and are used to fuel plastic bag bans in their aim to reduce the amount of plastics going into the ocean. Unlike the plastic bag movement, e-waste has had very few campaigns to educate the public about its effects. In a way, it is uncharismatic since it isn't associated with a charismatic species like beloved sea turtles and plastic, and therefore it has failed to garner the emotional support that plastic pollution activism has. Another uncharismatic quality lies in its appearance, since people perceive plastic bags and bottles as trash more than they would perceive phones and laptops as trash. In this project, I explore different scales of policy and activism to consider some important questions. What are factors that are contributing to invisibility of e-waste to the general public? In what ways, political, social, artistic, infrastructural, can we revamp the conversation? You'll see that the mobilization around e-waste is complicated and is present at some scales more than others. I argue that this is the result of not only the complexity of the management at different scales, but also market and social systems that have caused us to consume at a rate that feeds into the issues around the disposal of e-waste. The Resource Conservation and Reclamation Act, or RCRA, was signed in 1976. It deals with solid and hazardous waste, from production to disposal, otherwise known as cradle-to-grave policy. It is a very harsh type of policy with high fines. However, there are exemptions under hazardous waste, such as household hazardous waste, which makes it not a viable policy. There was an attempt to create a national policy through what is known as the National Product Stewardship Institute, which is a group that created conversations around the country to create a national policy to deal with e-waste, especially with laws dealing with the design of aspect of the waste stream.
At least maybe a standard way of doing things. I know the manufacturers don't like the fact that different products are commercially in every state. But although they complain about the patchwork legislation, there hasn't been enough. It's uncomfortable for them. They have to do different regulations in different states. But unfortunately, they seem to have accommodated to it. We when those discussions broke off, that was the perhaps naive strategy, was to say, oh, we'll go pass 50 different laws and then you'll want a national one. Well, we passed half that number and it didn't work. They accommodated to it, so, but maybe with some of the pressures, people will come back to the table. Always hope. Okay, so hi, my name is Scott Clay. I work here at Metro with regional government over the Tri-County area, about 25 cities and counties under that. And anyways, I got involved in the e-waste issue a number of years ago, back in the early aughts. And what happened was that we had an extensive household hazardous waste program here for many years, where we take in materials from households, your pesticides, your paints, and things like that. And what became of interest to folks was they wanted someplace to take their used electronics. What we passed in the state was a statute that manufacturers are required to make certain targets based on what comes in the previous year. You kind of had to bootstrap it up, but then started, and year by year each manufacturer has its target that it has to make. As the manufacturer, the way it works in Oregon is to you join your own plan, and then the state Department of Environmental Quality reviews the plan, and the plan will have multiple manufacturers. I think we started out with 3 plans, and then for some of the small manufacturers, we had a state contractor program where the state goes out and says, sort of like getting an insurance, or the public option on the insurance that never happened in the healthcare field. So you've got this one plan, so the small manufacturers can join in that one, and the DEQ just kind of solicits that and it goes out. And then there were 3, I think there are now 2 independent manufacturers plans. So if you're Sony or Apple or whatever, you join one of those organizations. And then those organizations have to field a convenient collection system, like have at least one site for every city of 10,000 in each county. We're well beyond what's required by those minimum standards of the manufacturers. And so then all the collection sites around the state are solicited to join by the different plans. So Goodwill joined in, so there's a lot of sites for the plan that uses Goodwill. What they do is they participate in as a collection site. They get paid a few cents per pound by the plan for providing that service, but they're not responsible for the whole 9 yards of sending them to a processor, and that which in other states they took on. So we're seeing a revival of some discussions because of some of the issues with that, and I'm hoping that there's be a new national conversation and people will look to Oregon for a way to kind of do a good one of these laws.
Well, commodity fetishism in general has to do with the ways in which, when things are turned into commodities, they have both a use value and an exchange value. That's Marx's basic point, that every object has to have a use value of some sort. Otherwise it has no exchange value. And yet, over time, in this system, the exchange value is what matters the most. It begins to eclipse use value. And he begins to wonder aloud about what happens when that state of affairs occurs. And one of the things that occurs, he says, is that we reach this point of fetishism, in which we see in objects the social relations that we have. Vicious cycle between what are known as proprietary goods, the iPhone 7, and what are known as commodities. Now, Capital uses the term commodity a little differently. For them, a commodity is when everybody can produce it. It's no longer proprietary. It's not still under my, copyright or patent or whatever. And now you can take the same technology and use it yourself. So, sure enough, Apple had a proprietary product, and then Samsung said, oh, wait a minute, we can do this. But in so doing, they turned it into less of a proprietary good and a commodity. What that means is the proprietary good has wider margins of profit. The proprietary good, as it's using the same technology, everybody's flooding into that market, the margins get slim. It's interesting. The commodity fetishism argument has always been, on the one hand, a very negative argument. It's that this encourages us to consume too much, to be wasteful. I mean, it's always had an environmentally negative connotation. But I wonder if we began to think about ways in which you could use the principles of commodity fetishism against itself. And there, I think, in other words, to embrace the contradiction in it, rather than simply trying to erase it, I think we might be better off.
I'm John Ashcraft, the Director of Reuse and Recycling at Free Geek. Free Geek is a non-profit that's been around in Portland for 15 years, almost 16 now. We started in the year 2000, where some local geeks got the idea that they had computers that were perfectly good but not up to their standards anymore. So they refurbished them, gave them out to people who needed them. The idea was there's a e-waste problem, computers not being recycled responsibly, while other people had a lack of access to technology. So to try to solve the problem of the digital divide and the e-waste problem, they came together with some friends, collected computers, refurbished them, gave them away. They set up a booth at Earth Day, asking for donations of computers. They quickly found that people didn't want to just give us computers, they wanted to be part of the process. So now we have thousands of volunteers who come in, rebuild donated computers, desktops, laptops, and related equipment, and then give that back out to other nonprofits in the communities, or volunteers have the option of earning a computer after about 24 hours of service to Free Geek. We've been with eCycles since the beginning. I think it's 6 or 7 years now. The program has grown every year. It's been very helpful, as I said, to be able to accept difficult to recycle materials without having to charge fees to our customers. Everybody loves that. Volume has been going up over the years. eCycles just reported 2.9 million pounds of covered electronic device under this state program, which is the highest in its history. Partially, I'm sure it's high because this last year they started collecting printers, keyboards, and mice under the program, whereas those had been separate earlier. Free Geek has seen increases in desktops, laptops, and LCD monitors over the last year, but the overall weights tend to be going down slightly because luckily laptops weigh less than desktops and LCD monitors weigh less than the old leaded CRT monitors. So the average weight of the material that comes in is going down, but the number of reusable items has been going up. This year has been very bad for the industry in terms of commodity prices. As the price of gas goes down, recycled plastics are much less competitive. When you can make plastics out of crude oil cheaper, then it's harder to sell recycled plastics at a price that justifies the effort and labor. Similar for non-ferrous metals and steel, prices have really plummeted over the last year or so, which has made it hard for the recycling industry in general. Free Geek's a little bit lucky because we have other streams of income in addition to recycling. We have a thrift store, we have generous donors who give a small contribution with their equipment. a few larger grants that come in. And of course the subsidies from recycles.
Overall, we see that even though there are many barriers to optimally deal with this issue of e-waste, we see that there's a lot being done to set up an infrastructure to do so. Perhaps the biggest barrier is the energy to keep pushing through to install a national policy around an all-encompassing e-waste management system. But what is going to keep that fire burning? Perhaps one of the biggest findings in my research was the power of the narrative of the people in India and China having extreme health issues with regard to the open burning of e-waste to recover metals. It was a horrific story that sparked movements to eventually get the signing of the Basel Convention, which in turn inspired other policy efforts around the world. Even though the U.S. did not ratify this international agreement, the Basel Convention inspired management systems such as the National Product Stewardship Institute and the Oregon e-cycles. It is important to note that narratives are also ephemeral and need to be acted upon in an institutionalized way, and to keep finding ways to create new narratives as we are bombarded by advertising and market forces. There is no one solution, and in fact, no solution is perfect. But that is okay. It is a dynamic and growing process to find ways that might be out of the box, and in other cases, in the box, as in utilizing strategies to keep dismantlers going through marketing and advertising strategies to get the word out, or increasing convenience, and even becoming more incorporated in the overall infrastructure. The point of this project is to keep these conversations flowing and to inspire others to think out of the box and find new ways to deal with this issue.